This is the Rise to Triumph podcast, and my name is Crystal Torres. I am on a mission to discover the key components of success of today's top TV and film industry professionals. If you are interested in becoming a working TV film professional or intrigued by the journey and are looking to surround yourself with the best industry minds, then this, my friends, is for you. Each week, we will have a chance to listen in on conversations that I have with top industry professionals and explore the behind the scenes of what it truly takes to rise to triumph. What up, everyone? It is the Rise to Triumph podcast. My name is Crystal Torres, and I hope you guys are doing good. I hope you guys are having a great day and great week. And I apologize for missing last week, but because we missed last week, we got double for you, which means double the not content, but double the audio. Yeah, I'll talk about that in a second. But if you missed last week or the week prior to last week, we spoke with casting director Yolanda Guillen, and she really breaks down the industry. She has this full perspective of for the casting process for commercials, theatrical, film, television, the Latino Spanish market, general market, and it's just kind of like this really great, well-rounded experience and new appreciation that I have for the casting process from the casting director side. So it was just kind of like one of those things where I learned so much, and I hope you will check it out if you haven't already after this episode. And this episode, we spoke with Victoria Sampson, and she is an award-winning producer, writer, director, film, and sound editor with credits of sound work, including editing the Academy Award-winning films like Speed. You guys remember that movie with when they were on the bus, and then if the bus like dropped under like, I don't know, I think 60 miles per hour, like then it was gonna explode or something. Yeah, she did the sound for that. And she has a really, really fun story about that film in this podcast. And also The River, which her mom actually won an Oscar for sound editing, being the sound, I guess, supervisor for that film. And she talks about her mom's experience being the first woman who won an Oscar for sound editing, which is amazing. And she's won 4 Golden Globe Reel Awards, and also she's won an Emmy. Yeah, she's also directed and produced short films that are also and commercials that have obviously aired nationally and been in festivals. She's also taught at schools such as UCLA, USC, AFI. Yeah, we talk about she has so many amazing stories, and I know this it was just hard to not want to listen to them. So that's why this episode is a little longer than the other ones, because she talks about stories with I don't know, George Lucas, that guy, Marlon Brando, uh Chris Rock, Sandra Bullock, Jane Fonda. I mean, just so many amazing people and stories, and these are people that she's just worked with, and it's just great to hear her perspective and how her journey to where she is now. So I hope you guys will stay tuned and enjoy this episode. Thank you. Bye. All right, Vickie. Thank you so much for having me on your beautiful ranch.
I know you need to take some pictures or something.
I know.
Post some pictures.
I will with Python.
Okay.
So I want to know, because you have had this, I consider you to have like this, I mean, I look at your IMDb page, you have like over 200 credits. I mean, like and then like from multi-million-dollar budget films, and you have also like just like some short indie projects. I kind of wanted to understand like what's been like your biggest career takeaway, and like how to succeed in this industry.
Well, it depends on what succeeding means.
That's
in
true.
what capacity. I mean, I started, I had the privilege, or every coin has two sides. So the curse and a blessing of having parents in the industry. My dad was a film editor and a B-movie director. He directed Target Earth.
Okay.
It was like a cult classic from the 50s.
Yeah.
Look it up. It's pretty funny.
Yeah.
And they shot it for a $60,000 budget back in 1952.
I feel like $60,000 back then in the 1950s.
Yeah.
That's probably like
but they had enough money to make the robot. It was like a robot invading Earth. So they shot downtown, at 3 in the morning on a Sunday, so the streets looked deserted,
Yeah.
And they had the robot body so that they could film him walking towards the camera, and then they'd put it on his back and they'd film him walking away. I mean, that's this kind of budget they had.
Wow.
Yeah. And then my mom was a film editor, assistant editor, and then a sound editor, and was the first woman to win an Oscar for sound editing.
Congrats to Mom.
In 1985 for The River, the movie The River, which I worked on also. But,
Yeah.
and you know what, I think now, like if she had just put my name on as a co-supervisor, I would have gotten an Oscar for it as well. But we didn't think like that back then, It was like she was always the one who did the bulk of the work. And then, she and I were a team, though. In many films we did, like Ordinary People and New York, New York, on Golden Pond, For the Boys, The Rose. We had some really Prince of Tides because of her reputation. She got these directors like Mark Rydell and Alan Pakula and Sidney Pollack, who called her over and over again to work on their films.
And how did she get herself established? Because
Well,
I mean, like being a woman, I mean, even today, still, it's like there's still like so much, like campaigning for women behind, the camera in all aspects, in all departments. So, like, how was that?
Well, she had an interesting story. She always loved movies from the time she was a girl. And she lived in New York, and she always would escape into movies. And I look at her life, and it was just a total escape. Her whole life was an escape.
How interesting.
Yeah, but so she was going to Hunter College, and in the film studies class, she knew more than the professor. And so the professor basically said, "Here, Kay, just you teach the rest of the class," kind of thing.
Wow.
And when
What
she was
college did she go to?
Hunter College
Hunter.
in New York.
Yes.
So when she was 22, and it was 1944, so right, about the wartime, she had an opportunity to come to California to work in the Signal Corps, which was a division of the Army that they would make training films, and so they needed the people to work on the films, shoot them, edit them, all that stuff. So she came and did that. She started doing that in New York, so she was like a few credits shy of graduation, but it was like the movie business was calling, and she had to answer,
Wow.
So she came to at least this is the story she told. She came to the gate at Universal Studios and basically said, "Hi, I'm looking for assistant editing work," and the guards laughed at her, basically, and they said, "Yeah, okay," and just then. Or the guy said, "Oh, come on, Joe, humor her. Call the editorial department. Like, let's just see what." And just then, the film editor had fired his assistant, and so the guy, the editor, is she any good? And the guard takes the phone and goes, "Are you any good?" And my mom says, "Of course, yes, I'm great." And so the guy said, "Okay, send her over." And the guards were like, "What?" And that's how she.
No way, that sounds like a movie in itself. What
It
the
does.
heck?
Yeah, so that's how she got her start. And really, she wanted to be a producer.
Because she already like did have the experience and already did know what she was doing.
Yeah,
then,
yeah,
like,
she did.
Of course, they
Yeah.
were just impressed.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Do you hear the donkey on your tape?
I
No.
hear. I don't. Yeah, I kind of hear, but it's cool.
That's the donkey.
We have for anyone listening, we're gonna have some animal background music. That's gonna mix it
on
mix
my
it
little
later.
ranch in Shadow Hills.
Yes.
Yeah, so she started working. I think her first film was How to Construct a Double Barbed Wire Fence for the Army. Yeah. And
but you said she wanted to produce, but
she did want to produce, and she would have been a good producer, but she ended up marrying my dad, who was a film editor. So she became like his assistant. And, you know, even then, and my mom was a pretty strong, independent woman. And, you know, so my dad, you know, when you're an editor, you say, you know, get me this trim, you know, a piece of the film, like when we used to have film that actually hung on little hooks and you had to get the film out of the bin. And so he'd say, get me this trim, and she'd go, get it yourself.
Hell yeah.
But, you know, I think, and her path just kind of geared into editing, and they got divorced when I was about 5, so she had to work.
Yes.
And she got a job at CBS on the shows The Rifleman, The Big Valley, you know, those kind of shows. And you can still, you know, they play reruns, and it's so fun to see her name in the credits at the end of the film. Sound editor Kay Rose.
Amazing.
Yeah, so you can still see that.
So going back to, because you had,
and she had a certain ethic too about, you know, because in TV they had no Foley, and for people who don't know what Foley is, it's the making of sound effects and movement, footsteps, prop handling that match the picture exactly. So they screen you know, they have the film projected on a screen. They're on a little sound stage with all kinds of surfaces and props. It looks like your grandma's garage, you know, that it's just full of junk and stuff, but they use everything they can to make sound. So they have 25 pairs of shoes. It looked like, you know, they got them at thrift shops because they probably did, because to find like true leather-soled shoes is really difficult because everybody's
sound
and how the sound is, and they use close-up microphones, you know, aimed at various, and they have a surface floor that has, you know, a little 2x4 square of parquet and wood and linoleum, tile, dirt, grass, and they use a 1/4-inch tape or cassette tape, you know.
Yeah.
They pull it out and they break it and they put it on dirt, and then when you walk on it, it sounds like grass.
What?
Yeah, and so and like cornstarch will sound like snow. If you put cornstarch down and step on it, it'll go crunch, crunch, crunch.
Wow.
So there's all these like little wet chamois. Could be anything from squishy blood, and celery breaking is bone crunching. You know, so everything, every sound you see in a feature film, we recreate on a Foley stage, and it was named after this Universal sound editor named Jack Foley.
Wow.
Because everybody up to then had been cutting sound effects from a library, which is what my mom had to do on The Rifleman and Big Valley. You know, so you had, like, let's say you have a cowboy walking down a boardwalk, you know, with his boots, and he has spurs on. So you have, you know, clump, 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 spurs, jingy, 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 jingy on this boardwalk. So if it had no English dialogue, or it didn't have any dialogue in it or words, the sound editor would kind of clip it out and give it to the sound librarian, who would then catalog it. Footsteps, man, boots, spurs, walk slowly on boardwalk. And then anybody else who needed that sound could go to the library, look up footsteps, man, you know, pull it out, see if it worked. But, you know, if somebody was walking a little faster or a little slower, you had to physically cut into each footstep and spread it out, or, you know, shrink it down.
To, like,
I mean, now in digital we can do that pretty easily and quickly, but back then on a splicer, which I have a bench set up in my garage actually.
Really?
Yeah, because I was transferring all my mom's 50,000 sound effect library entries that were all on 35mm film. You know, it took a year. I had a person that I paid to wind the film up on a bench, transfer it into digital, and now it's at the Hollywood Sound Museum, which you can look that up, hollywoodsoundmuseum.org, I think it's, or .com. And it's a friend of mine, Steve Lee, who's a librarian. He worked at Weddington Productions for a long time, and he's like cataloging all these historic effects, and we're creating a Hollywood Sound Museum because there isn't one. So it's going to have little booths where people can try doing their own Foley to a movie. And but you know, back then when my mom was working at CBS, they had to, you know, take each sound like a gunshot. Oh, we need, you know, G35. You know, they would give it a number and then a description. And I still have all her handwritten books of all her sound effects that she's collected over the years.
Wow.
So it's a massive project, but we're hoping that it's, you know, we've got some donors, you know, Lucas, you know, is interested in contributing.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, because he was a bit, you know, he's a big
I like how you say his
aficionado
name
of
so casually.
George. Well, if I said George, you wouldn't know who I was talking about. Because I got to work on Return of the Jedi, so, you know, I know George.
Lucas is interested, yes.
But because, you know, my mom was, you know, in the industry at a time, where women were, you know, women were more editors, film editors than men. And because once the men realized that it was akin to writing and the closest relationship to the director, then they started wanting that job. Because really men thought editing was like a secretarial type position where you're just, you know, you're just the hands of the editor and you're just putting stuff together. So there were many women film editors, and then slowly they've all, you know, I mean, there's still a bunch, but my mom's, one of my mom's best friends was Verna Fields, who was Spielberg's editor on Jaws.
Wow.
And, you know, she also started as a sound editor and moved up, and then she became, you know, vice president at Universal. And there's a building named after her, the Verna Fields building. But, you know, when I was little, we went to her house and swam in her pool, and, you know, Spielberg actually reshot a scene of Jaws using Bruce the shark in Verna's pool. And he would come with his Springer Spaniels, and we'd all swim in the pool together with his dogs. That pool needs to
be in a museum somewhere. Where the heck is it?
It's in Sherman Oaks. I think it was on Ranchito or one of those streets over there. In Van Nuys. It was in Van Nuys, really.
Someone has it now, and they don't even know that.
Probably not. They don't know the history. But she had lost her husband, and she had 2 small boys, and she had to work too. So she put in the back of her pool, you know, like the pool building, you know, like where you change and stuff. She turned that into a cutting room, and so she would bring her work home and be able to be with her boys. And this was in the 60s. You know, women weren't doing that then, you know, not like they are now. Hi, Pink. That's my little dog. And so. And she had this big black German Shepherd named Bubbles, Verna did. Wow. And the dog would just shed all over the film, so all the film would have all this dog hair all over it. So it was a pretty fun time. And but you know, my mom got good at placing sound effects, because you know, everybody had, you know, about a 10-minute, they call it a reel. So a 10-minute section, and there's 5 reels in an hour movie. Approximately, you know, on a TV show. It was and their motto was a reel a day, like you have to cut a reel a day or you don't stay. So, and that's a lot. I mean, 10 minutes of, you know, cutting the dialogue, which is all the production sound.
This was like all manual. This wasn't like digital stuff.
Yeah, and no Foley. So they had to, you know, like I said, if somebody was walking fast, if you put down a mug of beer on a thing, you had to sync that up, you know.
Wow.
And so there was always like chin socks. And, you know, as an actor, when you do a chin sock, it's all about the camera angle and where the person's going to hit their, you know, put their head back for the impact. And I attended a workshop that Alliance of Women Directors put on once about stunts and how to film them. And you could literally be 2 feet away, and the camera angle, if the actor pushes their head back at the right time, it will look like the fist has made contact with the face. It's amazing. It's all smoke and mirrors, you know.
Smoke and mirrors.
So she would cut in like the same chin sock as everybody else, and the mixers would, you know, the mixers are the people who take all the edited work and mix it so that you have all the dialogue, sound effects, background sounds, music all together, and, you know, make it so that that's what you hear in a theater or on a TV show. Yeah. So the mixers would say, look, I can see you use the same, you know, chin sock C32 as the guy who cut reel 4. How come yours sounds different? It's exactly, you know, he can see the number of the sound effect, and he knew it was the same sound effect. He's like, why does yours sound better? She said, it's where I place it, you know, like where it looks like it makes the impact.
She got very technical on where and how the sound effect.
Yeah, and all her colleagues would say, "Kay, why are you spending so much time?" I mean, they were like a lot of drunks back then. Like they would clock in at 7 in the morning, and they'd clock out at 4, and they'd go for like 3-hour lunches, and crazy. And my mom would be there just slaving away, and they're like, "Why are you putting so much effort and time into this?" She goes, "Because it's my name up on the screen, and that's my reputation, and I want to be good." And he's like, "Oh, you should save your being good for when you get a feature." And she says, "How do you think I'm ever going to get to work on a feature if I'm not good here?" And so that's how she did it. And she got on, I think her first film was The Fox, which was Mark Rydell, one of his first films. And I should ask him before his mind goes, because I love him. He's like my favorite director. That I've worked on all of his films since 1973. Wow. His film, The Cinderella Liberty, was my first job as an apprentice editor. Little apprentice editor.
That's amazing.
And then he would call my mom before he even knew who the actors were. "Hey, I got a film coming up, save September through, whatever." And because, and now as a director myself, I realize how important it is. You always want to have people around you that take away the learning curve, like you have shortcuts with people you've worked with before. And you don't have to go through the whole, like, this is who I am, this is who you are, let's see if we can make it work kind of working relationship. So, and he could just let her do her thing. He trusted her enough to, let her, and it was a very collaborative relationship. I miss that. I mean, from doing sound editing, we were down the hall from the director and the editor. We could edit something and say, "Hey, Mark, come look at this. Is this? I found an alternate for this take." Because I guess I should explain a little bit about the process, if you want.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Definitely.
as an actor, you're on set. They give you a mic. They have a boom.
Yes.
There might be a generator somewhere making lots of noise, and there's noise on the set. So. Basically, everything that gets recorded comes to us as a sound editor.
Yes.
We call that production sound.
Okay.
So that production sound has to be kind of equalized and balanced, because each take has its own, like when you listen to a take all by itself, it sounds fine.
Yes.
It's not till you intercut it with another take that has a different ambience in the background that you notice the change of the ambience.
Got it. And then when you're saying like different takes, so then it's just like maybe you like this one actor's take.
Well, like you have a master shot. So
Yes.
you start out with a master shot, and a master shot, you can't really have a boom in it because the boom would be seen.
Yes.
That's why there's problems with a 2-camera shoot, because you have one camera that has a close-up lens,
Yes.
and then you have another camera that's wide.
Yes.
So the close-up person isn't going to have the boom right over his face or her face, because there's also a master camera going that the boom would be seen. So now we're stuck with lav sound, and lav sound can be a lot of times very unreliable, and it's just not as rich sounding as a boom. A good boom is invaluable, but people think, "Oh, well, I'm saving time shooting, 2 cameras." But then, when I'm editing, I get a take of just your face, and suddenly you're off mic, because the boom is like way up in the sky or something,
Yeah.
So there's that. Let's see, how did I get off? Oh, so production sound.
Yes.
See, I have like 40 years of experience and knowledge to share with you in like 20 seconds.
No.
But,
Please.
okay,
it's
so
amazing. I'm getting like a whole history lesson
Yeah.
and everything. It's amazing.
And there's another funny thing, because you asked me about like the how does actors and sound people interface.
Yes.
But I've also noticed that in a master shot, because the camera is usually farther away, people tend to project more because the camera distance.
And that's something that you don't think about.
You don't think about that. So now when the camera's here,
You're like,
you tend to be a little more internal, right? Although that has to intercut with the master, which you're projecting more. So it's a challenge in that sense. So the director needs to remind the actors, like, have that same energy you had in the master shot. I mean, masters are usually only good for like the beginnings and ends of scenes.
Yeah, just to
basically.
establish that
Right.
scene, whatever.
Right. But they also, as a director now, the master shot informs everybody about where we're going in the scene.
Yeah.
And then we use that information to do coverage, you know, the close-ups. So let's say your master shot is, you know, 5 take 1, okay? And then your coverage of just you is going to be 5 apple, 5A. And then the other actor might be 5B, and so on. Every time the camera moves, it gets a different number, scene and take number.
Yeah.
So now when you're intercutting A and B and A and B, let's say behind you we have an ambience of traffic or something. And this guy, we shot him like the next day, and there wasn't so much traffic, right? So his angle's very clean. But I can't use the clean one because yours, whatever is the noisiest background, and I'm talking about the ambience behind the words, just the air, you know. Like here, if we were shooting here, we'd both have about the same ambience because we're in a pretty quiet environment. Yeah. You know, except for airplanes going by. Whenever you think about shooting anything here, an airplane goes by. But you know, there's sometimes where the coverage is like a day later on a big feature. It's not even at the same time of day, and the traffic could change, the noise can change. So the wind, right, or the beach, you know. So and we have to go by the loudest, noisiest person's angle. That then we try to find ambience between words to use as fill to put over the quieter person's side, because your ear will tend to eliminate noise. Like think about when you're in a bar or a noisy place and you're trying to talk to somebody and you're concentrating on their voice and you're looking at their lips and their eyes. All that noise in the bar goes away in your mind.
It does.
But we have to create that for an audience because it's not a subjective.
Because it's like, why are they in a bar? It's quiet.
Well, I never forget Robert Altman, who did a great film called McCabe and Mrs. Miller. Okay. Do you ever hear it? Warren Beatty, Julie Christie?
Oh,
It's a Western about, you know, he's starting a whole new Western town, and she's a madam from a brothel, and she sees an opportunity for her gals to set up shop there. So he's courting her basically to come, you know, set up this brothel in his brand new town. And I like that movie for a couple of reasons, because think about a Western town. Like we think of a Western town as being old, like this building, old, dilapidated, you know, wood, and you know. But in the West, it would have been brand new. It would have been new wood, you know. Nice. So he did that. He did that for his Western. So all the buildings looked brand new because they were, you know, they weren't weathered yet. So Warren Beatty takes Julie Christie to a restaurant or the saloon, and she's just really hungry, and she's just like chowing down the food. And he's fascinated watching this woman just eat this food. Yeah. So the camera slowly is moving towards her face and then also towards his eyes. So it establishes this kind of intimacy in this raucous bar, right? And the mixers at Warner Brothers at that time, whenever they saw a push-in of a camera, they would raise the level of the backgrounds. And Robert Altman said, no, I want you to take out the backgrounds. And they're like, what? You know? And he said, because he's so concentrating on her voice and listening to her that we want to, you know, lose the sound in that scene, which I copied that in my very first movie, Last Chance Saloon, where I have a scene that's like that, and I just eliminated the background sound as they did their arm wrestling scene or something. Yeah, just so focusing on what they do. And you know, mixers technically or traditionally haven't been. They're more on the technical side than the creative side. So that was a weird concept for them to think of taking out the sound. Yeah. But that's how we have to artificially create a scene. But so my mom's big thing she was a master of dialogue editing. We call it dialogue editing or production sound. I mean, she turned down, George Lucas came to her and said, hey, Kay, I'm doing this film called Star Wars. I want you to do the sound.
Don't tell me she turned that down. What?
And she said, oh, George, you know, science fiction isn't really my thing. I was like, Mom. Of course, you know, back then, sorry. That's okay. Back then, when I first heard the words, you know, the title Star Wars, I thought, oh, that's a stupid name, bro. A war out in space. I mean, that's so really stupid.
That sounds cheesy.
That sounds really cheesy. Mm-hmm. So yeah, she turned down the job on Star Wars. But you know, I say that because number one, she knew what her limitations were, and You know,
She
her.
probably could have done it though.
Oh yeah, she could have done it, and it would have been very different than, you know. I mean, that was a real breakout film for sound as far as like Ben Bird and the whole, you know. But my mom was pretty innovative, but she really liked to fix the dialogue, the production sound, which is a very invisible art, and that's kind of what I like to do too.
Okay.
Like I like cutting sound effects; they're challenging, but I like taking the problems of what the production mix has and fixing it. So because her feeling was like if you heard a dolly grip drop a wrench off stage in a scene, that takes the audience out of the, you know, suspension of disbelief that you're supposed to have when you watch a movie, right? You're supposed to get lost in the movie. And she felt that every time you heard that angle change, you know, the background ambiences change, you know, you do whatever you can to hide it, to mask it, to, you know, that it takes you out of the movie.
Yeah.
A current example of that is Batman. Was it Batman Forever? The one that had Bane with the mask.
Yes.
Worst sound. Sorry, my sound friends. But I was appalled at the sound of that. Like, why didn't we lose? And I asked my friends who mixed it, and they said, what happened? And he said, the director, you know, Chris Nolan doesn't like to loop. He doesn't. Looping is coming in, having the actors come into a sound studio and replace dialogue in a movie for whatever reason. Sometimes it's voiceover. You know, you have a narration that the actor has to do, which isn't recorded on a set, or you have, you know, problems that come up, like an airplane comes over in a scene while you're shooting a Western or a period film. You know, kind of does, you know, it kind of ruins the verisimilitude of that you're not in a 21st century environment. And so a lot of directors don't like it because it's kind of artificial. It's like, hello, a whole movie is artificial. You know, you're making people say words that you've written, you know? I mean, the whole process is artificial.
Yeah.
So why stop with that one?
In that world kind of thing.
I mean, so, you know, because, and I heard so many people at the screening of that Batman movie say, what did he say? Because if you have to turn to who you're with in the theater and go, what did he say?
Yeah.
That to me is a big clue that that line needs to be 80 yard. Because if somebody isn't hearing it clearly the first time through, and it's hard to use, you know, I watch a film that I work on, you know, many times. I could quote you almost every movie I've ever worked on because that's how well we know it.
Yeah.
But if I use my, you know, first time ears and I try to flag a line, like if I didn't understand it and I have really good hearing, if I didn't understand it, the audience isn't going to, you know. So I try to convince a director if they're saying, "Oh, that line's not that important." Well, you know that because you've written it, you directed it, you've edited it, you've listened to it over and over. You know what the line is, but the first-time listener is going to turn to his friend and say, "What did he say?" And then you've lost them. You've lost them for those seconds. And when I put it to them that way, then they kind of understand, or they begrudgingly, you know. So one of my okay, so I'm skipping around a lot.
No, don't get, these are all things. It's I'm just staying quiet, not because I'm just like because these are all things that I'm like already trying to cover. I was like literally having here like about looping and everything.
Oh, good.
But no, go ahead.
Yeah, so looping, and so my mom, you know, she liked dialogue-driven films. That's why we did things like Ordinary People and On Golden Pond, very dialogue-driven. You know, they're not big effects movies. So when the movie The River came up for consideration for an Oscar, all her peers knew that this would probably be her last shot at getting an Oscar. And at that time, it was voted on by all the sound people. And if it was a unanimous vote, it would go before the Board of Governors, and they could either accept that's why her Oscar, if you read it on there, it says Special Achievement in Sound Editing. Now we've fought to have sound editing on the ballot every year. So, but back then, it was a special thing called a bake-off, which editors could bring their, you know, the nominated editors bring like 10 minutes of the movie that they're nominated for, and it's screened. So it's not like there's no cookies involved, but it's like you show me your best sound effects, I'll show you my best sound effects, kind of bake-off.
Got it.
So, and I miss the bake-off because it was a great chance to network because we don't see each other. You know, the sound is so insular, you know, that you're sitting, I mean, I edit here at my house sometimes, you know, so you're just sitting here away from everybody.
Why did they take that away?
Because it was the trade-off for getting it on the ballot every year. And because the Academy has been trying for years, I mean, my mom was on the Board of Governors at the Academy and fought for this for years. The Academy has been trying to get it off the broadcast because people go, oh, it's sound effects, time to go to the bathroom. That's what Mike Myers did one year at the Oscar broadcast. Oh, the sound effects category's up. Now is a good time for you at home to go to the bathroom. It's like, come on, you wouldn't say that.
That's so rude.
Exactly.
Oh my God.
Very because people don't understand the contribution of sound. Even my mom had to tell the Board of Governors, the top people in the industry, no, it's not recorded with backgrounds and sound effects. You know, those are all added.
Yeah.
There's no, like in a movie like, Star Wars or Fifth Element, there's no place on Earth that I could go and record space traffic. You know, because it doesn't exist. I have to create the sound of what we think space traffic will be in the year 2200 or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And these guys did not understand that.
Yeah.
So
because you did it so seamless that it just like sounded like, well, duh, that's what it would sound like.
Right.
They didn't really actually think like, no, someone actually created that so that you can experience that.
Well, and that's why it's very cool that John Bailey is now the president of the Academy. He's been a cinematographer his whole life. So he's a below the line guy. We've always had actors, producers, directors, writers as the president, and now we finally have somebody who understands and appreciates the technical crafts, and we're hoping that helps to make a difference. But anyway, so on the when my mom got, you know, a unanimous vote, and they took it before the Board of Governors, and there was one guy who did not like Mark Rydell, who was the director of the movie. Had nothing to do with my mom's sound job.
Yeah.
But he goes, what's so great about the sound in that movie? It's just like some water and rain and stuff. And they're like, so she almost didn't get the Oscar, which was devastating to her.
Yeah.
And but people fought for it, and they said, look, I mean, her peers voted for this over RoboCop, you know, because you figure there's what, 4,000 plus actor members in the Academy.
Yeah.
When you look at the category of sound effects, I mean, what comes to your mind? Like how to judge a movie for best sound effects? What do you think of?
How do you? I don't know.
How would you judge it?
I don't know. I'm thinking just like, yeah, I guess the sound effects of like, I don't know, the cars, the background, the
so noisy things.
Noisy things.
Yes. Space. It's the same thing with people who try to judge costume design, and they go, oh, well, it must be the period pieces. Those are the hardest. If you talk to a costume designer, they go, those are the easiest because they're, you know, but to wear like what you're wearing as part of your psychology of your character, you know, that's a trick, you know, like what you're wearing say about you as an actor.
Newfound appreciation for it.
And I've also heard actors talk about how important a costume is to them, whether it's a normal, you know, modern day costume or because it helps them be the character.
Of course. Yeah, because it's like, yeah, it totally puts you in that mindset.
Yeah. So the Board of Governors decided, yes, she deserves the Oscar. Yes, she's going to get the Oscar. Because, you know, if that had gone on the ballot, think about it, The River versus RoboCop or Transformers.
Oh, I know. People would have automatically been like,
yeah, they go, well, The River had some, who even saw it, number one, you know, and it probably had some rain and whatever. So what I do for my classes is I show the students the first 10 minutes of The River. I was teaching at Video Symphony, which is now bankrupt.
Okay.
And I taught at UCLA, I taught at AFI, I did a year at USC, which I loved.
Yeah.
But then it didn't work with my work schedule, so I had to stop doing that. And I'm going to Indiana September 11th to teach a film workshop there for 3 days, so that's kind of fun.
That's amazing.
And because my goal is if I could get filmmakers of all kinds, actors, you know, we all need to help the sound because all the directors love production sound. So what do? You get good production sound. I can't tell you the amount of movies I've worked on lately that have the worst production sound. So then I'm spending my precious time and not getting paid enough to fix it when it didn't have to be broken in the first place. So I have a great document which I'll send to you and you can send out to your podcast people.
Yeah.
Sounds like a cult. Podcast people. Called A Letter from Your Sound Department. And it makes people aware, like, you know, where do you point the generator?
Yeah.
You know, if you're not seeing people's feet, take their shoes off, put the little booties on. We don't need, because feet can, the beauty about getting production sound.
Like, I see like the heels where they put like the rubber thing to kind of.
Yeah, yeah, because it's always better to add sound. You can't always take it away.
Yes, because
So,
it's already like mushed
married.
in.
It's already married. So you don't want to record like music, you know, in the background of a scene. You can add it. If you need the actors to speak up as if they're talking over loud music, you just remind them you have to speak up as if there's loud music. Or you put an earbud in their ear and you pump music in there, so they have to talk up like this as if they're talking over loud music.
Yes.
So there's a great example in The Rose where there's a scene where Barry Primus, who plays Bette Midler's manager, he's bringing her on stage, and they're behind the stage, so there's a you know, the screen, and then the band is right there, and then they're right behind it. And there was no music at the time. And he says, "Okay, Rose, you got to go out." And he's really shouting. You can see it on his face, you know, because the worst thing is trying to put a projected voice in a non-projected face.
Yes, that always looks weird.
Yeah. So you got to do it on the day. And he knew that. He knew there would be loud music there. And so he did that. And they were able to play the music like way, way up to make it seem real.
And you can always put it louder if the actors sound like they're projecting super loud. You can always make the background music louder. But if they're talking super quiet,
right,
you can have like really loud music.
Well, and that's why when actors sometimes get on an ADR stage, it's in this very quiet, dead room.
Yes.
And they're looking at a screen of themselves, and they're repeating. They have to repeat the same kind of cadence, and you know, and get them all the mouth things. And you know, it's a daunting task, really. But but it can be so. You know, if they're into doing it, you can make it and shape it the way you want.
Yeah,
I've
done
like Donald Sutherland. He's a master. He purposely speaks very low on the set, even though his mouth can look like it's saying louder words, because he wants there to be a sound problem enough so he can come back and loop it.
So he wants to loop. So
Some
why?
people
Why?
hate
So that
looping.
he can
control his performance better once he sees. And he
like
would do a whole
everything
scene all together. Like you said, you've been on a looping stage, so you know all the lines are broken up, line by line by line, and sometimes, you know, even between lines, like, because people when you're acting, you do weird pauses, like that, and you might, you know, maybe stutter or say, you know, or something like that fits in there, and you're like, what did I say? How did I say that? I get actors who go, what did I do there?
Yes.
You know, and so I have to, you know, my job is on the ADR stage is to help them, you know, not only get back into character, because it could be months now, and they might.
No, is it common for like the director to be there, or is it usually just like the actor?
No.
What is?
Never leave an actor alone on a sound stage. Here you go, have fun. No, the director is there because it's directing. It's part of directing, and then I'm there as the ADR supervisor. ADR stands for automated dialogue replacement, or looping. Because in the old days, it actually used to be a physical loop of film that had space in between it. So the actor would say, like, hi, how are you? Hi, how are you? And it would be a space so that, And in fact, there's a few actors like John Travolta who only likes to loop that way. And we can do that digitally now. We can, you know, copy the line of dialogue, make a space.
What's the difference?
He wants to imitate himself. Most actors want to at least tweak it a little bit and make it a little different or fresher or something, but he just wants to be a parrot. So he wants to.
That doesn't sound good. Is it good?
It's awful. It's awful. Because he'll do like 10 of those, and now in the cutting room, I have to go back, and they all sound exactly the same.
And you have to listen to
And now I have to listen to them, and then I have to sync them up to make sure they sync to his mouth. I mean, fortunately, we have, you know, digital things that we can time compress and stretch and shrink without affecting the pitch of the voice. So I can get very exact, and I'm like a big stickler on sync. Because sync is another thing that if you notice it, then it takes you out of the movie, right? Because you're going, oh, that doesn't look right, you know.
Yes.
Little twinge of something. So anyway, so I worked on Speed, the movie, not the drug.
Yes.
And that was an amazing experience because Jan de Bont, who was the cinematographer, it was his first time being a director. He'd been a cinematographer, so he's very visual, right? Think about the difference of somebody who's always just looking through the lens versus listening to. And it's so funny because traditionally, you know, directors, everything's about the image, right? And the only person on the set who's thinking about sound is this poor sound mixer who's off in some corner, who's going, "Can I have a rehearsal?" And they're like, you know, like, you know, they spend hours on the lighting, but if the sound mixer wants a rehearsal to check his levels or something and make sure all the mics are working right, you know, they're like, oh, we're waiting on sound. You know, do you ever hear them say, "Oh, we're waiting on picture"?
No.
No, because that's like, you know.
Yeah.
So Jan wanted, on Speed, he wanted the bus to be actually moving because he felt that it gave the actors an authenticity and that thing to work over, to project over and have energy in them. But the bus, unfortunately, was only going like out of first and second and maybe third gear.
Okay.
And in the storyline, the bus has to stay at, you know, 50 miles an hour, 60, whatever it was, you know, or it blows up. So that destroyed it right there because you can hear the bus going,
like barely going up.
you know. So they said to him, "Well, you're going to have to loop it." And he's like, "Okay." He probably didn't even know what that was at that point. So that was my job. So for 3 weeks in a row, 3 weekends, Jan, his assistant, and myself would fly up to Canada to loop Keanu Reeves because he was working on Johnny Mnemonic at the time.
Wow.
And so, you know, Saturday, Sunday, we'd loop, come back Monday, go back the following week, did that 3 weeks. And it was so frustrating for Keanu that because here he's working on a very physical movie 5 days a week and looping on his previous movie on the weekend.
Oh, yeah.
By the third weekend, he literally picked up a chair and threw it through the wall.
Wow.
But he was very dedicated to doing it, and because the director was behind it. Like if the director comes in and goes, "I hate looping," well, how do you think the actor's going to feel?
Yeah, I'm like, well, why do I need to do it?
Yeah, and you know, and it's true that some sound supervisor, ADR supervisors overprogram, you know, the looping, like because it means that they're putting down a lot of loop lines that may not be used or may not be necessary because we don't have the time to check the production tracks because everything's happening simultaneously. So we put it on the sheets to loop it just in case, right? But then actors get burned and go, "I can't believe you're gonna make me do this." It's like, yeah, I'm such a taskmaster, you know, or I don't get paid for every loop line you loop, you know. It's I don't care, you know. I'm just trying to do a good job for the director. But they get that way. It's sometimes it can be just so tense you can cut it with a knife, and other times it's really fun and cooperative and collaborative, you know. So on Speed. We decided, all of us kind of decided together that Keanu had the chance to, now this was his first role after Dude, you know, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
Yeah.
So, and here he's supposed to be a hero, and he didn't want people like laughing at him or something. So he kind of beefed himself up vocally and made himself a little more authoritative. So what I do in my classes too is I show the before, you know, with all the noise from the bus and his acting, and then I showed them the after, and it's like a world of difference.
Really?
Yeah, and so the director afterwards.
So it actually worked out for him as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Because it gave him like a stronger performance.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Plus you then have the, because I mean nowadays if a movie like Speed came to me, we could probably clean it up pretty well with our noise reduction tools that we have available. And I've been thinking about that, like, you know, like because of the problem created a better solution for him as an actor, you know, whereas if I just cleaned it up, it would have just stayed in that performance. Because then you still have to add like the bus noise on top of it, sound effects wise. So, and this way you have more control. Like if the dialogue is just separate and clean, and then you can put the sound effects on top, and you can guide it by. You know, you can have an intimate scene even though you're still hearing bus noise. Whereas the first way, it was like the noise floor was way up. We call it a noise floor. So right now we have a pretty good signal to noise ratio because you have me laved.
Okay.
And I don't know what you're hearing as far as background. Maybe you're hearing the ducks and the chickens and you know, air hum of an air conditioner. You know, so I always encourage directors, you know, when they find a good location, I say go there and just listen to it. Is there a flight path going by at a certain time of day? You know, is there traffic, you know, at unusual times or whatever the thing is, you know.
Yeah.
But just go and listen and see if it's okay, you know. So Jan, after hearing all the, you know, on the mixing stage, when we got to the mixing stage, he goes, you know what? I think we got better performances from the actors from ADR than we did in production. And to me, that was like getting an Oscar, which it did get an Oscar, by the way. And the guy who was the supervisor, you can look him up, I'm not going to name him here. The Academy approached him and they said, well, you know, we understand like Vickie did this phenomenal job, and this wasn't on digital, this was on film. Yeah. So I had to get the sync, you have to get sync, performance, and projection correct. And then everybody feels it in the room. It's a really interesting, when you get the sync right and the projection and the meaning and the performance is all there, it's like you get goosebumps, you know. But so the Academy approached this fellow and said, you know, we think you should add Vickie as a co-supervisor because she really did an Oscar-winning, you know, job on this film. And he's like, no, I get sole credit. That's it. And then he got an Oscar. And did he even thank me on the broadcast? No, he did not.
Wow.
And you know, it's like I could have had one. I mean, you know.
Yeah.
For just for putting my name on a credit, you know.
Yeah, and he still would have got one too.
Exactly.
Exactly. Like
but that's the kind of egos that are rampant in this business, unfortunately. But yeah, but I'm still real proud of that. And then he ended up having a Carmen experience on another film, where the director basically said, look, if you because he went to this director and said, I have a problem with Vickie. I don't think she should be working on this film with me. And I was always on, and this guy was coming on, you know. And the director said, you know what? If you have a problem with Vickie, I don't want to work with you. Because Vickie's like the easiest, most, you know, cooperative, collaborative person I know. And if you can't work with her, I don't want to work with you. And he fired him. I was like, yeah.
Well, you know what? That worked out.
It did work out. But so I've gotten to learn a lot of things from a lot of different directors I've worked with, you know, and working with actors on the ADR stage.
So okay, so then.
Sorry, I've been yabbing a lot.
No. Like, so what are ways that, you know, as an actor, as a director, like people that have to work really close with you, or that we can help so that it can help the production sound, so I guess, you know, it can improve your job or make your job a little bit smoother?
Well, I don't want anybody to do anything to make my job smoother. I want them to do the best for the movie.
Their job for the movie.
Yeah. Because, I mean, you know, as an actor, again, you have so much other things to worry about.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and you shouldn't ever have to worry about sound. You know,
but it was,
just make sure to take your lav off before you go to the bathroom. That's all.
You probably hear a lot of stuff in the bathroom. But like how you were saying, you know, like in the master shot and then like the close up, you know, it's just like those are things that, I mean, of course, like it's just pristine to get the performance right. But like I didn't even think about that, you know, like if the camera is like over there and then the camera's up here, of course, like
I mean, that could just be a question to the director, like, you know, oh, in the master shot we were all kind of, you know, projecting more. Do you want that kind of energy in my close-up or something like that? Because maybe the tone changes, you know, over the course of the scene. I know it does in the stuff I've been shooting, you know. It just changes because everybody gets, you know, you do sort of the master as like a trial run, you know, kind of thing, you know, and it sets the kind of choreography for the scene.
Yes.
And but yeah, I think just, you know, making sure that, you know, that you sound good. You know,
just, I mean, like working on your own voice and stuff.
Yeah. Because there's I think a lot of younger actors, they end up mumbling. I think there's a psychological thing that when you have a lav on, you feel like you don't need to project as much.
Yes.
So, you know, the younger actors, they kind of mumble and they don't hardly even move their lips, and, you know.
Yeah. What about, and then you said, I mean, like that was an amazing story that you told about, like, you know, your experience on Speed, and then how, like, you were saying that there's like egos that you deal with in the industry. And I mean, you hear that, and, you know, like, I haven't experienced that, but, like, I mean, you've been in this industry for, you know, and have been on so many projects. How are you dealing, or how do you deal with that, or what's your way of, like, you know, continuing so that you can persevere and still do your job.
It's, you know, I adopted my mom's thing. It's like I'm only as good as my reputation, you know. So even though I'll be spending hours working on a scene, getting out little clicks and pops because I think they're annoying on a subconscious level, but nobody knows I'm doing that. I mean, it'd be like 2 in the morning. I'm like, yeah, I did that. It's like, great, I'm all here by myself. Yay, Vickie. But I'm doing it for the good of the movie. And sometimes I've worked on projects where my sensibilities didn't mesh with the director's, you know.
And what do you mean by that?
It means like he could care less about, you know, those subtleties and like, you know, I'm trying to think of a politically correct way to say this. So I was working on a film, I'll just say it, directed by Joel Schumacher. And he's a very misogynist director. He doesn't like women. He doesn't think women should do anything in the business or live. I don't know. And I was the ADR supervisor, and I had programmed the line in the movie. Chris Rock says, "Lion King, I can't do that." He's a ticket scalper, and he's in Central Park, and he's on the phone. And I did my due diligence, meaning I looked in all the other outtakes of the film to see if he said that. Oh, because underneath him saying that, somebody off stage goes, whoop, like that, like under the dialogue. So it's married to the dialogue. I can't unmarry it.
Yeah.
Doesn't work. So I put it down on my sheet. Now it's not a crucial line. It's not a emotional line. It's just Lion King, I can't do that. You know, I mean, that's how long it takes to say that line.
Yeah.
He comes over, he picks up my sheets, he shakes them in my face and says, "Why are we looping this?" Like in front of Chris Rock, who's the actor who played that part. And I said, well, because there's, I said, I looked in all the alternate takes. He improvised it, and there's a big, you know, whoop underneath it, and I can't get that out. And he's like, oh, so you mean to tell me we're going to waste this actor's time and all these other people's time? You know, and I'm thinking to myself, we could have looped it 5 times in the time it takes for you to yell at me, you know? And I said, look, I'm just trying to watch out for your movie, you know? And he's like, oh, I think Vickie wants to direct this movie. Go ahead, Vickie, direct this movie, you know, kind of thing.
Sounded like he was intimidated.
Oh my gosh. And I said, really, I'm just here to protect your interests, you know? And and this is my job. This is why I'm hired to do this, you know? I'm not trying to make your life or Chris Rock's life miserable, you know?
No.
It's just I see that there's a sound problem. But I mean, I was just shaking, and I had to go off and cry, you know?
Was this like in the middle, and like, I mean, like, what part of your career was this? Like, you were already pretty established.
Oh yeah. And he's like, well, I've done, you know, so many movies, and then I was like, well, I've done so many movies, you know. I mean, I've worked, you know, at that point I had worked with, you know, De Niro and Streisand and Liza Minnelli and, you know, a lot of ego people actor-wise. And, you know, but usually people try to respect. And it was just like, why do you have to be that? And then I found he's like that with everybody. So he was with the production mixer, who had carefully planted microphones in this column. It was like a long shot, and they were running by these columns, and so he'd planted mics there so he could catch them on, you know, as they came by. And then Joel says, you know, I think we should shoot it from there. And the production mixer said, oh, well, I need to go up and I have to rewire it. He said, well, you should have thought of that I might want to change my mind. It's like, can you imagine trying to second guess every decision that somebody makes?
And that
it's
takes
like,
time. That's not like something that you just
So that's the kind of stuff. But you know, I've also encountered actors like Jack Nicholson on Ironweed. There was a scene where, and Ironweed's a period piece. It's supposed to be in the 20s during the Great Depression. And they're walking down a modern street, so you're hearing modern traffic. So the production mixer, in trying to overcome that issue, kind of did the mics from below, you know. Yeah. So it got all the grit that they're walking on with their feet, crunching like crazy under their dialogue. So, and it was about a minute scene, which film-wise is like this. And you know, so I put it down on my sheets. And I come in, and Nicholson's there. He's like, oh, my God, I got to loop. He says, that night was the night of my 50th birthday. I was drunk as a skunk, and it was like the best work of my life. You're telling me I got to redo all that? And it's like, I said, well, and some actors really know that they're not very good at looping. So they kind of purposely do a bad job. So you have to end up using the production take somehow. So that's the other side of it.
The other side.
Because they know if they do a bad job that you cannot use it. So I said, look, and I was very honest. I said, look, you do the best you can do with this, and I promise you I will do the best to get out the noise and the footsteps. So, and he kind of phoned it in. It wasn't that good. It wasn't really usable.
So did you end up using the original?
And we were on film, and I had to, nowadays there's a program you can put in called spectral repair, and it shows you a visual image of the sound problem, like a big spike, and I can just highlight that and hit replace, and it, But back then you had a little grit, so you had to take a razor blade and like crisscross on where the grit sound was, crisscross like that. Manually with a degaussed razor blade, because otherwise it would magnetize the oxide on the film. Wow. And scrape that out without hopefully hurting the voice, Wow. And it took me like, I don't know, a day to do a 1 minute scene. Then I had all these, if you look, I should have kept the little roll. It was all full of white splicing tape, because it was like every other thing had to be spliced, Wow. So it was kind of crazy. Wow. But and some egos are lovely to work with. Jane Fonda was great on Golden Pond. She parked down the street from the studio, and we had a cone set out for her, and I said, oh, why didn't you this? And she goes, oh, I thought that was for somebody else. I said, no, it's for you. Yeah. So, there's some people who, yes, this is part of the process. We may not like it, and I try to make it as pleasant as possible, and I help them, because some people get intimidated by it. It's, if you've done it, it is kind of an intimidating process. You're standing up in front of the screen on the stage and with headphones, and it goes beep, 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 talk. And you have to be like spot on. So usually people either get it in the first take, or they flub up the first take because they're nervous. Yeah. They do the second take for, and they're still trying really, really hard. By the third take, they're sort of relaxed, and they just let it happen. Yeah. Sometimes I even say, I say, close your eyes, and I say, trust the beeps, Luke.
No, yeah.
And then they do, and they said, wow, that was, because it took away the worry about syncing. I said, you know what the performance is here. Just close your eyes and just go off the beeps.
Yeah, for me, I was like intimidated. I was like, whoa, I did that. I was like, I have to redo that again. I don't know if I could do what she did.
I know it is. Yeah. So yeah, there's egos, but you have to deal with them, because that's your job. I did have an interesting experience with an actor on Scream 4. It was a scene, it was only about 10 lines, and it was a scene in a car. I think it was Emma Roberts who came in to loop. And she saw it on the sheets, and she's like, oh no, we have to do that scene? And I said, oh, it's only 10 lines. And she goes, really? We spent like a week shooting it. And I said, well, it's only 10 lines now. Yeah. And she had a muscle memory of the actual shoot. Whereas to me, I'm not there. I'm not privy to all that. And so it was a cool lesson to realize some actors are reacting to, what they remember about being there on the set. And I said, yeah, it's 10 lines. And she goes,
it. So she was thinking that she was gonna have to do this whole week process again. But you're like, oh no, you're just saying 10 lines.
Right.
You got this. You could even look at the script. No one's gonna be like looking at you.
Yeah. And then I had another cool lesson on. For directors, I always learn this from Mark Rydell, where he'll say, and action. Yeah. So that little space, and you can't say and action. That does not do it. You have to have a space. And what it does is everybody kind of takes a collective breath on the set. You have a space with no dialogue, that you use as the ambience of that particular scene. And he does the same at the end, where he goes, and cut. And it's like, I said, you're so brilliant in doing that. I said, do you even know what that does for us as sound editors? He goes, yeah, I do. Wow. And what it does is it gives us, like, okay, imagine I worked on both Sex and City movies, right? Yes. Those girls never stop talking. There's never a pause in their dialogue for any kind of ambience. Yes. Like I could pause now, and I can use that little space. If somebody had dropped something, or there was a click or a mic bump, I can take that same ambience and replace the bad sound without any kind of, notice. and that's the goal of it. And some people go, oh, well, that's why we record room tone. You know, it's like, yeah, but room tone makes everybody very upset. Nobody on a set wants to wait for room tone.
Yes,
you know,
and by that time it's
and
always hot.
the slate is longer than it takes what you, because 30 seconds of silence is like an eternity. When, you know, the grips, they want to get to their next setup. You know, I mean, it's really, unless you're recording dialogue as a wild track, we call them wild tracks. So
how much of a pause is like good enough? Like, is it like 3 seconds? Like,
yeah, I mean, you can do a lot with 5 seconds of sound. You know, like just between the and and the action and the and and the cut. I also learned as a director how important it is to do and cut, because it makes people kind of freeze. You know, and sometimes that's all you need. I was editing a film for this director, and it was the emotional part of the scene, and I forget if the actors were kissing or what, but he called cut too soon, and the DP kept going smartly, you know, and then finally he had to stop. But when I was showing it to the director, he goes, "Oh, don't we have any more frames of that?" And I went, "No, you actually yelled cut like 3 feet earlier, and the DP kept going, and that was as far as, you know, like the film ran out or something."
yeah.
And he's like, "Oh." I said, yeah, you want to wait a little longer than you think you should, just for that, you know. So, and you know, as I mean, it's a different thing when I talk to a group of directors or filmmakers about sound than I do for actors or other sound people. You know, we have all different levels of things, and because now I've done all of that, because I've written and directed 3 short films, a bunch of commercials. And I just finished directing Shelby's Vacation. I didn't write that one, but I directed it. Now it's playing in film festivals.
That's
And
awesome.
we got good sound people. And it's so funny because my sound guy was a former student of mine from Video Symphony. And we were on the set one day inside this lodge up at Mount Baldy. And he said, Vickie, I seem to recall in my classes that you said you should always say and action. And he goes, I don't think you've done that the whole time we've been shooting. It's like
You forgot.
and that's a funny, yeah.
And those are things that happen.
Yeah. I mean, even for me to try to remember those things on a set,
Because there's already so many other
there's
things.
so many things going on, and you know, everything's going a mile a minute. And that's why I always encourage people, like, hire good sound persons, because you're not going to be able to interface with them. I edited this feature for a friend of mine, and it was like the worst sound. I mean, the guy, he had like a table of people or sitting around a couch, and he put a lav on every other person because he figured that, you know, hi Pyson, that's my horse.
Pyson.
He came to say hi.
Pyson saying hi.
You know, he figured that, oh, you're going to talk to her on the couch, so you'll just get picked up in her mic. And it was crazy. It was crazy. So you never want to save money on a sound person, you know?
Yes.
I mean, even I had to pay for my sound person, and you know, and he was a former student, and he gave me a discount, but still, you know, it's like you can't rely on your, you know, your brother Bob to, no offense, Bob, you know, to
I have
to hold it.
Audacity. It's free.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you just, you know, you want to make sure. Anyway, so I said, well, didn't you listen to the sound? She goes, no, very shyly, you know, like shamefully. I said, why? And she said, well, he came highly recommended. And I said, but still, you got to listen and make sure, you know, he's getting the right sound, because, like I said, and that I did for free. So imagine, like, here, you know, instead of using my talents and expertise on enhancing stuff, and I'm spending all my time trying to fix problems that shouldn't have been there in the first place. Yeah. So there's the other cool thing on Return of the Jedi. I was sent to London to loop all the London people, like Alec Guinness. He wasn't a sir by then, but Alec Guinness, and he'd never done the beep 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 looping. He'd always used streamers, you know, the old-fashioned way. And he's like, oh, you know, my dear, I don't know how to do this, you know. And I said, oh, don't worry, you know, I'll help you. It's just like a rhythm thing, and you know, it's beep 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 talk. So I said, you're like the imaginary fourth beep. He's like, okay, you know, so.
So sweet.
That was sweet. And, you know, at the end I said, oh, could you sign my ADR sheet, you know? So he's like, oh, no, my dear, I would be so honored if you would sign my sheet. And I was like, I'll sign yours, but I still want you to sign my sheet. But on that show, there was a scene, because breathing is really the key to life, you know? If you don't breathe, and it's also the key to making ADR not look like ADR. So, but what happens is the beeps come traditionally over the inhale. Like if I said, okay, say hi, how are you? Beep, beep, beep.
Hi, how are you?
Well, you would normally inhale over the beeps, right? You're like, what am I doing?
I'm like, did I say that?
Yeah, so, and the beeps are out loud on the speakers, so they get recorded, so they're not usable, right? I mean, the breath. Did I say beeps? Or do you have an itch?
He's scratching his neck on the fence.
Yes. So, and you know, back then it only went into record after the beeps were over. So nowadays, if I see an actor is breathing over the beeps, I'll tell the mixer in the booth, I said, just put the beeps in the headphones, you know, so that when he inhales, just say the line, because it's really hard to program an inhale and then speak, you know, because it just is hard for an actor to do. So, so I said, you know, I couldn't find a breath. Like I kept notating where to find a breath. And finally I said to the director, I said, can we just, you know, do a really quick take of just an inhale? They're like, why? I mean, we're in this big stormtrooper hangar. It's a big close-up, you know. I said, just trust me. It'll take, you know, 5 seconds. So we, we did that. Tried to swallow too fast. So they, and so they were mixing up in Northern California, and I was back here already. And they called me from the stage, and they go, "You were right about the inhale. Nobody could believe that it was ADR because of that inhale." So,
that's
you know.
awesome. So that's a good note for people.
Yeah.
Remember the inhale.
Yep. Breathing is the key to life.
Breathe out.
Yeah. And then, you know, just a note about like sound effects and ambiances and stuff like that. Again, you can always add sounds. You can't always take them away. So, you know, for directors, sometimes the feeling about the place and time is in the script. You know, like some screenwriters will write sounds down as capital letters or something. Things that, I mean, I don't need to know if I see a dog barking that I need to put a sound of a dog barking there. But I might not know that they want a train, a wistful train, or they want an airplane or a helicopter. Like, you know, we could be in any room anywhere, like, is it a dilapidated apartment in a bad part of town? So we're going to hear sirens and helicopters and screamings and gunshots or whatever, you know, or are they, you know, in a nice urban neighborhood with, you know, nice dogs and crickets. And, you know, like sounds of themselves aren't inherently scary or funny, but it's the context of where you put them.
Oh, I just like had like an aha about like sound, because you just like, it is such an art form in itself. Like you really have to think of like, yeah, like how are we making this so that when the audience sees it, they're like that visual when they hear those sounds, like those sirens, or like, you know, the nice, like that nice little bluebird that's chirping or whatever, like how that reminds them of a certain like area.
Yeah, it's you know, to give you a feeling, because, you know,
all about
for
the feelings.
Right. Like I just saw Marjorie Prime. You know about that? Lois Smith and Gina Davis and
I didn't
Tim
watch
Robbins.
it, but it's
Very interesting and disturbing movie. But I had heard some reviews about it before I saw it. I saw it on Sunday, and it all takes place in a house at the beach. And I was very aware of, you know, the sounds and like the ocean waves and things like that, and just how challenging it is to do a good sound job on a you know, a dialogue-driven movie. You know, like I did a movie called Guarding Tess with Nicolas Cage and Shirley MacLaine, and that's about, you know, him guarding a former first lady in the winter of her life, and it takes place in the winter. So I'm like, great, you know, what do I put? You know, winter birds from Washington or Virginia, wherever she lived, crows, you know, like everything was very sparse and
are there people
silent.
that like will go to like like if it is like a specific location of something, and we'll like
record it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, if you have a budget for it, yeah. I mean, I love recording. Sometimes I come out here and I just record the crickets at night, you know, or the donkey or whatever, you know. I mean, it's a pretty good environment here, but it's hard to escape the noise of a city, you know. And then there's also the use of silence as a sound, which I love. I liken it to places in a movie where it gives the audience a collective kind of inhale. So think about riding up a roller coaster, and you're up at the top, and you're just about to go down, and it's that moment where everything's just silent, and then bam, it just falls, right?
And like as you said, that I had the visual, I had the feeling, and it's true. You don't think about that one moment of silence, but it's so impactful.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of times on these big noisy movies like Pirates of the Caribbean, which I worked on, you know, it's just wall-to-wall sound. So, and if you have a big sound, and some directors like, I want it bigger, bigger, bigger. It's like, there's no place else to go. We have to start down here and work our way up, because, you know, the things can only go so far. You know, the speakers can only take so much. And now with sound, I mean, you figure sound was the first sense in utero, is sound, right?
Yeah.
I mean, sensation too, but sound, you know, embryos can sense sound, and the muted voices of their mom, and the blood pulsing, and all the stuff that, you know, music, you know, you've heard like, play Mozart for the baby, you know, and all that's true. So, and sound is the only thing in a movie that really makes us feel in the environment. Like, even though I said so much to spend on the visual thing, sound takes up so much real estate. Like, what speakers are we putting it in? You know, now we have Dolby Atmos, which is the speakers that go over our heads, above our heads, so we can send sound from the front to the back. We can
And
surround
vibrations
ourselves.
of sound too.
Yeah. So it's very high-priced real estate, really. Like I can't tell you how many times we were on the stage and spending time on just getting one little thing through this wall of noise. Like, you know, which means you have to sort of bring everything down. It's very highly choreographed and intentional. Like, we spend many, many hours just making sure people can feel that little sound, you know, in that speaker right there for a second, you know. And nobody would ever be aware of it, because most of sound is unconscious. I mean, really, like, be aware of what is out here right now. What do you hear?
Yeah, ducks and is that a duck?
Crow. That's a crow.
That's a crow.
And we have peacocks in the neighborhood too.
There's little birdies flying around. I hear a little chime.
I hear a hum of like a pool. I think it's his pool pump out here is a hum.
Yes, I hear that too, and that's really subtle, but you'll hear it just like as the undertone.
But again, like if I tell people, you know, when they were cutting sound effects, like if you have a constant sound of something, your ear tends to make it disappear. So if you have birds and wind, it'll almost be as if you put nothing there, because you're so used to hearing it, your ear just makes it go away. But if you put one little bird...
Chickens.
What's happening, Buffy? What, Pinky? So, you know, if you put like a bird every now and then, or a crow or something, then it's like, oh, you're aware of a bird without, because you can't draw attention to it either, unless that's the intention of the piece.
Of course.
You know, it's like what's on the outside of the frame, you know, that you don't know is there. And some people like are very good at layering and sound design stuff. That I don't feel that that's my specialty, although I like having fun with it. And this next film that I'm going to be directing is a $2 million paranormal thriller.
What?
Which is not my genre. I don't even like horror films.
Yeah.
I worked on 4 Wes Craven movies, and I learned a lot from him. Like, I like the psychological
I love
aspect.
psychological thriller, but this
So-
is just like straight up horror.
No, it's not straight up
More-
horror.
more-
No,
more-
it's
more
psychological.
psychological?
Yeah, paranormal thriller with a serial killer and a really
Yeah, I
cool
love
twist
those-
at the
yeah,
end.
Yeah, I love those
Yeah.
thrillers. Thrillers are fun.
Yeah. So and we have a great star attached already. She read it in 20 minutes and said, I have to do this. So that's really cool.
Wow.
So it's going to happen. We're just waiting on a male lead now, and a friend of mine wrote it for me specifically for the sound and the visual of it, and because I thought, and originally she wrote it as a short, so that I could have a piece to show that I could direct that kind of stuff. Hi, chicken. And and then my DP on Shelby's Vacation, she said, "Why do you want to direct another short?" I was like, "Yeah, you're right. I'm kind of done. I need to do it," because Shelby's was supposed to be a feature, but we couldn't get the financing for it.
Okay, because I had
Yeah.
okay.
Because you knew it as a feature. We just couldn't get the financing, so Nancy said, "You know what? I mean, we spent 4
awesome.
years on this. Let's just make it as a short." I was like, "Okay," and then we did it. But this one, so Wendy expanded Small Whispers to a feature length, and I hooked up with a production company guy I know, and he's like, "Yeah, I think my investors will go for this because that's the genre they like, a low budget, kind of horror movie that."
And I hear that those are easier to get more financing for.
Yeah. And
people just like to watch those. Yeah.
And Wendy even has an idea for the sequel, so she's already got a franchise.
That's amazing.
And Nancy Schreiber is going to be our DP, who's a fabulous. She was the first woman to win the American Cinematographer Society Award.
Wow.
American Society of Cinematographers. There we go, ASC. And so and it's very evocative visually. It's going to be really cool because it's like abandoned train tracks at night in the rain.
I love how you've evolved yourself in the industry. Yeah, you've just
thanks.
kind of your mother, brought you in, but it was just kind of like one of those things where you had to be good yourself, and then you've worked on all these projects.
She didn't even get me into the industry because she didn't believe in nepotism. So it was like
she wouldn't.
Yeah. She's like, if you want to do this, you do it.
Do it yourself.
And I really wanted to be a writer director because those always seemed like the best. Like the coolest thing is I was always writing stories.
You have,
but then
you have the control. But now you have you come from the perspective of the sound and the people that. Yeah, you have.
But still, when I look back on it, I was like, I did that for 40 years, because I basically kept working.
It's a blur.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I can remember very clearly all the different movies and experiences on the movies, but I can't remember what my kids were doing at that time. I had 2 daughters, and I had to, raise them and work, and my friends were making way less money, and I felt like it was sort of soul-sucking, but I also like the craft of it, but it's very involved. I mean, you sometimes have no life at all. They just own you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for months at a time.
Yeah, and their baby is that film, is
right,
that project.
Right. And people used to ask my daughters, "Oh, do you want to be a sound editor like your mother and your grandmother?" And no, we want to be able to see our children.
So that's the other side of it.
Yeah.
That it makes it harder for.
Yeah. But now, young women who are coming up in especially directing, they're much more vocal about. We had Patty Jenkins, who directed Wonder Woman, come to our AWD group, little salon thing, maybe 50 people in a living room.
I like how you have just easily dropped names throughout this whole thing. Patty Jenkins.
And she was so cool and down to earth, and she, listening to her talk and not, giving up on her dreams, because when she directed Monster, nobody wanted to touch that, and the producer basically said, "Look, she's the Eileen Wuornos, the one who wrote it and lived it. She's the one who's been talking to Patty. Patty's written it. Let her direct it. What's the big deal, So Warner Brothers finally consented, and
I heard that took years.
Yeah,
for them
years.
to convince.
And and then she had brought them her idea of Wonder Woman years before, and they just said no. And then they wanted her to do Thor, and she's like, I'm not attracted to Thor like the way I am to Wonder Woman. So she said it wouldn't be any good for my career to have taken on that movie and made a bad movie, because then they would have said, oh, it's a bad movie.
Yeah.
You know, so she didn't. And then she had her son, and they wanted her to work, and she's like, no, I just had a baby and I'm not working right now, kind of thing. And now there's much more things about, you know, women who are competent, and they want to have like a child care collective like on the set, because there are working women. I mean, I went to this woman's sound group called LA Sound Sisters, and boy, they have horror stories. I mean, of being a woman on a set in a man's world as a production mixer or a boom operator or utility. Oh man, I mean, the harassment that they go through, being grabbed, you know, they're on a ladder holding a boom pole and some guy comes and grabs their butt, you know. It's like, and you know, if you complain about it, you know, then you don't get hired. So it's, you know, it's the same kind of thing for directing too. Like I could whine and say, oh, I didn't get an Oscar for Speed, and you know, which I do, but you know, but I don't, you know, what good does that do me, you know? I mean, I like to tell people just because, you know, it meant something to me at the time, and
well, and you know what, and you deserve.
But I'm
that.
Still proud of my work.
Yeah,
you know, it doesn't change my work ethic. You know,
it doesn't sound like it's coming from like a spite. It just comes from like, you know what, if they're not gonna give me that, you know, that award for recognition, I'm gonna recognize myself.
Yeah.
And I think that alone is powerful. You know?
It helps, but still, you know, and you know, the people who knew me then, I mean, know what a good job it was, and you know, I mean, it holds up.
Of
so,
course.
But again, it's I mean, I don't work any differently if I'm getting paid a lot of money or I'm getting paid nothing. Like my work ethic doesn't change. I know some people go, oh, well, if you're not getting paid anything, why are you doing a good job? It's like, because my name's still on the screen.
And you never know who's gonna see it or who that person is.
And it makes me feel bad to not know that I didn't do my best, you know?
Yeah.
But doing my best takes a lot of time, and that, you know,
and time,
and time slips away. No, you know, as I get older, I mean, some people go, well, you retired from sound, you know, you retired, why are you so busy? I said, well, because now I'm doing what I want to do, you know, I mean,
That's amazing.
Yeah, I can work my life however I want it.
And how amazing is it that you can transition from, you know, retiring from a sound, you know, and then now, you know, still be busy and do what you love.
I mean, do I miss the big movies and the big paychecks? Yeah, I do somewhat, but you know what? It was always I'm working for somebody else. I'm making somebody else's film better, and
it's not yours.
It's not mine. Yeah, and I want it to be mine. I have so many stories that I want to tell, and I'm 64 now, you know, and it's like, I gotta do this while I still can.
Like prime time.
Well, I know, but it sounds old to me.
Yeah, no, I mean, of course, but I mean, it's like you're still got another good 20 years on your belt.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yep.
People
I'm a horse riding grandma. I can do anything.
I love it. I love it. Is there any, so
you were going to ask me about some kind of time?
Oh, yeah,
time
like
frame?
what, because I know you said it takes time. Like, so what is that time frame of like for, is like, sorry, I'm like losing my words.
That's all right.
Sound editing for like a big feature
major film?
Yeah, like what would that,
it varies. It's like 3 months. It could be longer sometimes, but I think the average now is about 3 months.
Yeah.
My friend Dave Grimaldi, who's the husband of Laura Grimaldi, who plays Shelby in Shelby's Vacation, he's a mixer. He was just on Planet of the Apes he's a mixer editor. He was on Planet of the Apes for a year.
Wow.
So that's,
wow.
I was on Clan of the Cave Bear was my first solo supervising job that I did, and I was on that for a year. But that was mainly because they were always changing, the storyline like every week. It went through so many versions. I had people who were working for me who like went away and got married and came back and still worked on it, bought houses, cars, you know. It was crazy.
You're still working on it.
and you know, and I had such a vision for that movie. And then they ended up using a synthesized score. Like it's when synthesized music, like not live musicians, but samples of music. And synthesized music has a different frequency than regular music. And so I was creating all these really cool backgrounds and, prehistoric, sounds, but no pterodactyls because they were gone by then. But, just like winds and, creating this atmosphere, which should have been very primal, But the synthesized music just ate up all the frequencies in all my winds. So you hardly even hear them and stuff. So it was, it was a cool experience, but it was sad too.
Yeah, you're like, it could have been better.
Yeah, but that's all right, You don't know, you can't really tell if you're working on a good movie or not sometimes. Like
that's interesting.
like when I first got on Speed, I remember Sandra Bullock coming in to do her ADR, and she's like, "So, do you think this movie's any good?" And I said, "Well, we like it. We think it's good, but you just don't know sometimes."
Yeah.
And
you only really know when you release it and the mass audience really sees it for themselves.
Yeah, but you have to sort of fall in love with every movie you work on. A little bit. And my guess now is that if you have to grow to love a movie you're working on, it's probably not very good.
Rule of thumb.
Yeah, it's like unruly children or something. You sort of love them, but no.
It happens.
Yeah. But again, you don't work on. You don't do any better or less work depending on the type of movie it is either, because it's always your reputation and your own work ethic, and I wish more people had that. But we also saw over the weekend, we saw oh gosh, I just blanked out, Kathy Moriarty and Daniel Patty Cakes, which is an amazing movie. And the people were also down to earth. The director, Jeremy Jasper, he had done it as part of the Sundance Lab. And this woman, Danielle, is Australian and was playing a rapper from New Jersey. She'd never rapped before, and she had to have a New Jersey accent.
Wow.
And they were all there at the screening at the Academy, and then they have a discussion afterwards. And normally they shuffle them right off, out, and so you don't get to talk to them. But and these are Academy members. So it's not like fans all starstruck. And, but they came right down off the stage and talked to everybody, and it was really lovely. And and it made me aware of how, when you run, the fish stinks from the head, right? So the director just loved everybody. Everybody had a great working relationship because they all were working on the movie, together. And
it was very collaborative.
Yeah. As opposed to like a Michael Bay or these other kind of directors that are very abusive and, they run the ship by, overpowering everybody as opposed to being collaborative. And I'll never forget Mark Rydell, because I did Cinderella Liberty. That was my first film with him. Harry and Walter Go to New York, which is a very forgotten film with James Caan and Elliot Gould, and a whole Swoozie Car, and the Rose, The River, On Golden Pond, For the Boys. Those were all the movies that I worked on with my mom. And then I thought, well, when she retired, I would inherit all his, but then he stopped making movies. It was like, no. And then people don't do that. They just don't have collaborations like that too much anymore. Everybody's off somewhere in a building, with the director and,
Yeah.
So.
Then they just go and piece it all together.
Yeah. So, I mean, besides the production dialogue, which is that's like the foundation of the triangle of sound, I think. Yeah. So you have the production sound, which has to be great because that's where your story is. And a sound editor who comes in and fixes technical problems using other takes without telling anybody is a bad thing to do. Because imagine you have your own, your favorite music group, right? And you listen to their album over and over and over. Every nuance of every inflection. Then you go see them live in concert.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's what happens to directors and film editors, because they're sitting in the editing room editing this over and over. They know every nuance, and then you come in and change something, even a syllable. I worked for a director, for a film editor on a show, and he knew I had changed a syllable of his dialogue. A syllable.
Wow.
And I said, well, just, keep an open mind. Does it work for you or not? And he's like, okay, it's better. It's like, okay, that's all we both care about. It's not an ego thing, you know.
Yeah.
So there's that. So you have the foundation of the dialogue, then you have, you know, the background sounds, which is the stereo and other speaker ambiances, you know, wind, rain, air, ocean, you know, just backgrounds, right?
Yeah.
Then you have sound effects, so like car chases, explosions, zombies, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
You know, heart effects, the door closes, everything. Then you have the Foley, which is recreating everything because we have to do that in features for foreign versions. So not too much. They do some Foley for TV, but generally they have such a quick schedules that they don't, you know, you can hear it just clopping through, like somebody does it in a day, you know. But Foley for domestic, you know, because everything that has, like if I set down my glasses on here while I'm talking, you know, I can't use that sound, but if I paused and set the glasses down, I could pull that sound out and put it on a special track that gets sent to the foreign version. Wow. So we take out everything that has English in it. So if you like flip between like a Spanish channel and an English channel, yes, you'll hear a full Foley version of an American movie in Spanish. Will be completely Foley and ADR and sound effects.
Wow, so you can't use the same for the English?
No, because the English is English. So anything that has sound in it, and you know, in our English, we have this ambience around us, but that's why we cut backgrounds too, because the backgrounds. So all the dialogue always comes out of the center channel. So any air that's in the center channel has to be replaced with some air in the center channel when they put in the ADR of French, German, Spanish, whatever. You know, well, you think of animated films; those are all manufactured. I know. Just ADR and Foley and background and sound effects and music. That's crazy. Yeah. So, but I think, and I learn a lot about directing by watching other directors on the ADR stage because that's the only time I've gotten to see them do stuff with them. You know, and I try to adopt those. I wish I had more time on somebody's set to see how they direct actors. I haven't done that. It's like I'm just directing like myself, you know, out there without, you know, just my knowledge of directing from watching directors on an ADR stage. So
yeah, well, I think you've seen a few few good ones.
I did have a funny experience with Marlon Brando. Okay.
Oh, okay.
So he was doing the Canadian film called Free Money with the bad boy. He was on 2.5 Men. Charlie Sheen.
Yes.
Yeah, Charlie Sheen, the bad boy. And so Marlon came in to do a looping, and this Canadian company, they call me when they need somebody to just, you know, work with the actors on the stage. So there wasn't a director, there was just me and Marlon in the mixer, right, in the back room. So it's a scene where he comes into a bathroom and he's like banging on the door and he's calling to Charlie Sheen in the bathroom. So he comes in and this was like 95 or something like that. And he's, you know, big guy, right, at that point. And he was always like leaning back in his chair, and we're like so afraid he was going to tip over that we switched the chair in the middle when he went to the bathroom. But anyway, so he comes in, and the line is like, you know, hey, Charlie, get out of there. You know, like he goes, hey, Charlie, get out of there. Like, okay, he's behind like 2 doors. So I wait and see if he's, finally I say, Mr. Brando, sir, you know, he's like behind the door, so I think you need to project a little more. He goes, oh, honey, I'm just fucking with the producer. I want him to bring me back again so I can get more money. I'll come back and do it right next time. It's like, okay, got it. And the next time he comes back, he goes, hey, Charlie, get out of there. You know, he did it right. But it was like, oh, I have to tell him to project, you know.
He knew he was trying to outsmart the whole system. It's funny.
Can I pet you?
That's so funny. All right. Well, I don't want to take up any more of your, too much more of your
That's
time.
all right. Did I answer? I told you I could talk forever.
Yeah.
So
No. Yeah. I felt like I didn't have to ask any questions.
Really? You don't have any other questions to ask?
No. No. I guess just wrapping it up. I guess, you know, since, you know.
Oh, we didn't talk about loop groups though, because there's, you know, ADR principal actors, and then there's loop groups.
Okay.
Which, do you know what those are?
No.
Loop groups are. Loop group is a great thing to get into because you get residuals because it's a SAG. So it's a group of actors who improvise all the backgrounds in a movie of like a restaurant scene, the patrons
and
the.
I get into that?
Yeah, I know, right? There's a few of them. There's a few of them out there, and they're highly specialized. Yeah, very insular. Yeah, they don't let too many people
we're
in.
trying to keep this money for ourselves.
Right. But they like on this one movie that I did called 15 Minutes with was with De Niro, and it took place in like Prague and Russia and England and France and Germany. So I had to have people who spoke all those languages to be the background people in like airports, restaurants, cafes, you know, government center or whatever.
Yep.
So, you know, the person who's a loop group caster, they have a Rolodex or whatever it is now, you know, of what's the modern day Rolodex, you know, of who can speak French and, you know, and still act too.
Yes.
But sometimes you just have the same people throughout the whole movie who have to pretend to be other people in different scenes.
How interesting.
Yeah, and it started out as like, they call it Walla groups because they would just, you know, the sound editors like at CBS where my mom worked would say, hey, we got to do a saloon scene. Come on, everybody, come on and do some Walla. So they all go Walla, 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 Walla. You know, and then finally somebody says, it sounds kind of fake that way, so maybe we should have them say real things. But they have to say real things that don't obstruct the main people's dialogue. Because on a set, you don't want the background people talking. You want them just mouthing words.
But
you
then in the movie, they have to make it seem like, and then who are those people that do that? These
the loop groups, yeah. And they get SAG minimum for the day, and they get residuals. So I got my two daughters both. I got them in loop groups, you know, when they were very young, and they got SAG. So they still get checks for like 32 cents, or they get maybe a couple $100 a year. But the people who do loop groups like consistently, they're making a lot of money every time that. I mean, my daughter Amy, she was in Addams Family Values, which was like a TV. No, that was a movie.
Yeah.
She gets residuals from that every time it airs somewhere, or an episode of some show, you know. And
wow.
They only did like a handful of things, you know. But yeah. So.
Yeah. Well, what advice or I guess things that you can give to people maybe that are on the come up, like in sound or directing, that maybe you know, like what you know, like you see them on their come up. What is it that you can help them with?
I think the best thing, no matter what you want to pursue, is keep pursuing it and do it. You know, don't think it's going to come to you. You have to go out and get it. You have to be present. You know, I think a lot of young people, at least I've seen in my classes, they just think that the world is going to just come to them and worship at their feet. And I mean, I can tell almost from each class, like who in the class is going to really follow through. You know, it's the kids who want to volunteer and they want to come to set and they want to hold the boom, they want to observe, they want to absorb everything they can. You know, they're hungry to do it, you know, like my mom was, you know, coming from New York. It's like, I want to do this. It's got to be something that burns in you to want to do. It's not like, oh, I guess I'll go work at McDonald's. I mean, no, it's like if you have a dream to be whatever, an actor, a sound editor, you know, there are ways to find to entry level in, and people will know if you're good or not, and you get good by practicing and by wanting to do it. It's really an attitude thing, you know. It's like there's a few times where I said, why am I doing this, you know? It's like, so why can't I just like stay at my ranch and play with my horse and visit with my kids, you know, my grandkids? No, I have this burning desire to get these stories out in the world, you know, and I'm not giving up. So I think that's, you know, you volunteer to do stuff. Like AFI has, besides their regular directing program, they have the Directing Workshop for Women, which is a really great program that now they even have job placement. I mean, when I was in the Directing Workshop for Women, it was 1987. Wow. And you were lucky if you filled the little 70-seat theater in the, you know, at the school. And now they host a big you know, showcase of all the Directing Workshop for Women projects of the year at the DGA, you know, and they get job offers, and now they're off directing, you know, episodes of things, and there's so many opportunities for them, you know. So there's programs like that you can apply for, but even if you wanted to just act in them or be a technical person and be a sound person on a set or just be a PA on a set, you know. I think anybody in production needs to be a PA on a set. You know, you need to see how things are run, you know, and if you're doing that, be proactive. You know, like you see a cable left out on the floor, pick it up. You know, if you see some trash, pick it up. Like do something. Don't just sit on your butt and have somebody tell you what to do. Be proactive. And, you can, nowadays, I mean, there's film schools all over the place. You can just go there and say, hey, I want to volunteer on a student production, And yeah, you have to pay your dues, you have to do a bunch of free projects, but you're going to be the one that gets called when they say, oh yeah, I remember Crystal was like so cool on the set. She helped out so much and she was so willing to do anything. Yeah, I'd have her on a set anytime. And then you keep moving up, and that's how you do it.
I love it. I love it.
Cool.
I could talk to you forever, but
I know now you have a lot of editing to do. Sorry, sorry about that. You have to find some sound bites in there.
Oh no, yeah, probably just leave most of it. But thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. It was a pleasure.
All right. I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. I know it was a tad bit long, but I mean, come on. Vickie, thank you so much for sharing your stories and your experience in this industry and really just giving us a newfound appreciation for sound. I think my biggest takeaway was thinking that the hardest and the most difficult work for sound editors and sound effects were like the loud, crazy sound effects things, like when you hear like the boom and the whatever, like the car crash sounds. But, it's actually from what I learned from you, Vickie, was the dialogue driven sounds where it's really about making it feel like it is so real and so authentic to that time and that place. And yeah, so I am so appreciative and thank you so much for speaking with us. And again, she is, I believe she's look at the show notes because I know she's, like she said in the episode, she's going to be teaching the weekend of September 11th. I think she said Indiana, but I'll put it in the show notes, so check that out if you are interested. You definitely, in sound, she's definitely someone that you want to get connected with. And yeah, and I'll put all her links, her website, her contact information, IMDb in the show notes. And if you want to get in contact with her, she's someone who's very kind and very willing to help. And yeah, again, check us out on the Rise to Triumph podcast website at risetotriumph.com. You can also check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Rise to Triumph. And you can also check me out on Instagram and all that good stuff. I'll link everything down below in the show notes. So hope you guys enjoy the rest of your weekend. And next week we're gonna be I think I'm gonna feature a film editor, and we're gonna get what the film editors see in the cutting room floor that you don't. It's gonna be good. Really good stuff, really eye-opening, insightful stuff. And then we also have another casting director coming up. So stay tuned, guys. I got some good stuff coming for you. And yeah. All right. See ya. Peace out. To anyone that's actually still listening to this to the end, because this is going to be really long. All right. Bye.